All right, we're going to begin our lecture on ecology and humans and the environment. These are chapters 18 and 22 in your textbook. If you guys would like to read them, let's follow along. All right. We're going to begin with a lot of terminology. I'm going to start explaining to you a major term. So there's going to be a lot of terms, but you're going to need to have to understand kind of how they interrelate and how they connect. So let's begin. Let's define ecology first off. Ecology is how basically living and non-living things interact with each other. So it's a study of that. It can be studied on a large scale. It can be studied on a small scale. The word interdependence, and this is kind of showing an example of interdependence. What we have here is how showing you how photosynthesis and respiration are linked. You guys probably remember this from first semester. Photosynthesis creates oxygen and glucose, which are needed for other organisms to do respiration. They release carbon dioxide and water and starting the cycle over again. So interdependence has to do with how things are related. Your textbook uses an example like the following. It wants to show you examples of relationships. So what your textbook says is during years where you have seasons where you have heavy rainfall, your textbook says years of heavy rainfall in areas lead to an increase in Lyme disease. Right? So how does this all connect? Well, increases in rainfall lead to increases in plants. Increases in plants lead to increases in animals that eat those plants. These animals are vectors or carriers of ticks. Ticks in these grasses will land on them. So if you have more of these animals, you're going to have more food for the ticks. So what does that do? That increases the population of ticks. More ticks around means more humans are going to get bit. Therefore, more humans are going to start developing Lyme disease. All right. Now let's talk about levels of organization. So they're all going to get defined in a second, so on the next few pages, but let's connect them on this. This is showing you big getting to small, all right? And small organisms can even get even smaller into other things, basically. Molecules can be broken down into atoms, atoms down into neutrons and protons and electrons, so on and so forth. So it's just a level of organization. All right, so let's define all these terms that are part of this. Biosphere is real simple. That's the life sphere of the planet, Earth, the surface of the Earth, basically, and the oceans. Ecosystems, these are living and non-living things interacting. All right, there's two parts of an ecosystem: the living part called the biotic part, the non-living part called the abiotic part. All the animals and plants and bacteria and fungus, all the other things: temperature, pH, salt levels, oxygen, and so on and so forth. Right? A community. Community is defined as all the living things in an area. So you're talking about many different species living together: plants, animals, so on and so forth. A population is a group of the same species that live together. And a species is defined as organisms that can produce offspring that are also fertile. Habitat, right? This is where something lives. These poor guys down here, these polar bears, if you see most of them today, they're not so healthy, you could say. They look very skinny and bony. It's really sad. Climate change has reduced the amount of ice they have to travel on to fish. It's really, really sad what's happening to those guys. Tolerance curve. So another term. Let's talk about tolerance curve. What a tolerance curve is showing you a range of conditions, basically, that an organism can survive in. Okay. So what range of conditions can something survive in? Okay. Acclimation. Acclimation has to do with how you adjust to certain abiotic means non-living factors. How do you adjust? So what does our skin do? Our skin gets more tan. This is showing you a bit of an extreme example of it, but over time your skin will look like leather, not good, and cancer. You're in a very high risk category if you're in the sun a lot. But can your skin darken a little bit and protect you from the sun? Yeah, that is your skin acclimating, not adapting. In order for an adaptation to occur, you need a lot of things taking place, and you need generational situations. Like you need a population, and that population adapting over time. So this isn't talking about a population. It's talking about one person's skin getting a little darker. They are acclimating. Conformers, these are kind of, they're the cold-blooded animals. They do not maintain an internal environment or an internal temperature, so to speak, that, for example, like a human does. We are hot-blooded. So we are not conformers. Conformers are organisms that their environment dictates their conditions. So if it's too cold, their inside gets too cold. If it's very hot out, their insides get hot. So they need to sometimes they may sun themselves to heat themselves up and so on and so forth. Regulators, mammals, warm-blooded organisms, things that basically maintain a constant temperature. We are regulators. Here's J-Lo. She's one of my favorite regulators. Um, Here we go. Here, you may know the word dormancy. You may know it as hibernation. A lot of organisms they take time out. They sleep a lot. They reduce their activity. All right. Migration. You always notice birds. They always joke around and shows that the birds are flying south. As a kid, I used to always see, oh, the birds are flying south. That told you that winter was coming. Well, when you fly south where it's warmer, these birds can survive in warmer climates. They don't want to be in an area when it gets too cold, so they would migrate to a more favorable place. Niche. This is a pretty big. This word means a lot of things. This word has to do with the conditions an organism lives in, the habitat it may want to be in, what it uses for its food. This picture is showing you all these different types of birds and how they all habitate in one tree, but they feed on different things. So they can basically their areas of competition sometimes overlap. These areas where there's an overlap in what they need, these are areas where they may be competing in. So this is just showing you that they all can live happily in a tree as long as they partition, their needs. A generalist, this is something that has a wide range of conditions that it can survive in. Possums here, they can pretty much eat almost anything. They can feed on whatever's out there. So the generalists generally are better survivors. All right, humans are generalists. I mean, we eat all kinds of plants, we eat all kinds of different animals for meat. We have a wide variety of food sources that we can survive on. So we are generalists. Specialists, they're kind of limited. They don't, for example, this guy right here, this poor koala, if you remove the few species of eucalyptus trees that they can live on, then they don't have a food source anymore. So specialists struggle. Producers. Now, when you get to AP Bio and AP Environmental, we will call them the primary producers. Pretty much these are the organisms that do photosynthesis. So they are producing the food or the organic molecules that you need in an environment or an ecosystem. Plants, bacteria, phytoplankton, algae, seaweeds, these are the producers. Terms you may see. You're going to see these terms especially later when you get to AP Bio and AP Environmental Science. Gross primary productivity. This has to do with the rate at how many, for example, you have an ecosystem and you have a lot of producers there. So let's say you have a rainforest. That rainforest is doing photosynthesis. So gross primary productivity is the rate at which those producers are doing photosynthesis. All right. What does primary productivity lead to? It leads to biomass, the organic material. So plants produce biomass when they do photosynthesis, when they produce foods and other organic molecules. They create biomass. You and me, how do we make biomass? We eat. So we create more biomass when we eat. Plants produce it when they do photosynthesis. Net primary productivity has to do with gross primary productivity in that it subtracts something. So gross primary productivity is the total photosynthesis that the producers are doing, but the producers need some of what they produce for respiration, for their own personal needs, for survival. So you subtract that out, and then you get what's called net primary productivity, and this is the total biomass that accumulates. So this is what's actually available for the organisms that want to graze on those plants. All right. So they need some for respiration. Some of what they produce goes into respiration, and then what's left over is technically what's available to the things that want to feed on those plants.